The elevator doors slide open on the top floor of the Al-Mazrui villa in Emirates Hills, revealing a private domain few have entered. Detective Amina Khalil steps into the marble foyer where just 4 days earlier, the body of Rosalinda Mendoza was discovered by the family's security chief. Blood stains still darken the imported Italian tiles despite attempts to clean them, telling a story the powerful family has desperately tried to erase. This is where it happened. The crime scene technician explains, gesturing to the precise spot where Rosalinda's life ended. Strangulation, based on the preliminary autopsy. Defensive wounds suggest she fought back. Amina nods, mentally reconstructing the scene. But to understand what happened here, what really happened, she needs to understand the house itself and the fractured family that occupied it. For the Al-Mazrui villa isn't simply a residence. It's a physical manifestation of wealth, power, and dysfunction. Each floor a separate kingdom within the family's divided empire. The 3-story structure dominates its plot in Emirates Hills, Dubai's most exclusive neighborhood, where homes start at 50 million dirhams and the guest lists are more carefully guarded than state secrets. Designed by a renowned Japanese architect, the villa blends traditional Islamic elements with ultramodern luxury, a physical reflection of Dubai itself. 15-foot walls topped with discreet security sensors ensure privacy. Manicured gardens with rare imported plants surround a swimming pool that shimmers like a mirage against the desert heat. Khalifa Al-Mazrui, the 67-year-old patriarch, occupies the entire top floor, a testament to both his position and his increasing isolation. From his sprawling quarters, the stern businessman with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes commands a shipping and real estate empire worth billions. His private study contains a desk from which he's negotiated deals that have reshaped Dubai's skyline and shipping routes. The bookshelves hold bound copies of every contract he's ever signed, organized chronologically, a physical archive of his rise from ambitious young man to industrial titan. Since his wife Fatima's death 5 years ago, Khalifa has retreated further into his private domain. Staff report he sometimes goes days without leaving his floor, conducting business via video conference and taking meals alone. His bedroom, which Amina now observes through the open door, contains a single photograph. Fatima in her youth, before cancer hollowed her cheeks and dimmed her smile. Beside it sits a leather-bound Quran and a set of prayer beads, outward signs of the religious devotion that shapes his public image. He built an empire but lost his family, remarks Amina's partner, noting the absence of any photos of Khalifa's sons. The middle floor belongs to Nawaf, the 42-year-old heir apparent to the Al-Mazrui fortune. His space reflects his personality. Meticulously organized, aesthetically minimalist, and coldly efficient. Harvard Business School diplomas hang in perfect alignment on his office wall. The furniture, all imported from Milan, arranges at precise angles. Even the bookshelf appears curated for impression rather than use, business texts and economic analyses displayed like artifacts. Nawaf's marriage to Layla, daughter of another prominent Emirati family, was arranged to consolidate business relationships rather than for love. Their 3 children, rarely present as they attend elite boarding schools in Switzerland, occupy bedrooms that look staged rather than lived in. The master bedroom contains twin beds separated by a nightstand, a detail Amina notes but doesn't comment on. Mr. Nawaf spends most evenings working, the house manager explains. He typically returns from the corporate offices at 7, takes dinner in his private dining room at 8, then continues working until midnight. Mrs. Layla usually attends social functions alone. The contrast with the ground floor is striking. Where the upper levels project control and restraint, Bassam's domain explodes with evidence of impulsive hedonism. The 29-year-old youngest son has transformed his wing into something between a luxury hotel suite and a high-end nightclub. A professional DJ booth occupies one corner of the vast living space. The bar stocks rare spirits that contradict the family's public religious observance. Bassam's bedroom features a custom circular bed beneath a mirrored ceiling, a design choice that causes even the experienced detective to raise an eyebrow. Mr. Bassam entertains frequently. The house manager explains with careful neutrality. The staff has standing instructions to maintain privacy during his gatherings. What unifies these disparate spaces is their isolation from each other. Private elevators and separate entrances allow family members to avoid interaction entirely if desired. Staff report the three men sometimes go weeks without direct contact despite living under the same roof. Family meals happen only when business necessitates, typically with Khalifa speaking while his sons listen in calculated silence. This physical and emotional separation created the perfect environment for what happened next. For in a house where no one spoke to each other, no one noticed when all three men began speaking to the same woman. The Al-Mazrui Empire stands at a critical juncture. After decades expanding across the Gulf, they're preparing to close a $3 billion deal with conservative Saudi investors for a massive port development. The partnership would cement the family's regional dominance for generations, if they can present themselves as both financially sound and morally unimpeachable. The Saudi royal family members behind the investment fund are known for their religious conservatism and have withdrawn from previous deals over ethical concerns. This is why the scandal was so devastating. Amina's supervisor had explained during her case briefing, not just embarrassing, but existentially threatening to everything they've built. Into this fractured house of wealth and ambition came Rosalinda Mendoza, a 34-year-old Filipina hired through an exclusive agency specializing in staff for Dubai's elite. Her employment file, which Amina reviews as she walks the scene, shows impeccable references and a background check revealing nothing concerning. Previous employers described her as diligent, discreet, and respectful of boundaries, the highest praise for domestic staff serving Dubai's wealthiest families. The photograph attached to her work visa shows an attractive woman with intelligent eyes and a carefully neutral expression. Her application lists education at the Asian Institute of Banking, cut short by family circumstances. Those circumstances, Amina discovers through further investigation, involved a husband who accumulated gambling debts before disappearing, leaving Rosalinda with responsibility for 2 young children and no financial support. She was exactly what the family required. The staffing agency director tells Amina during an interview, experienced enough to handle a complex household, educated enough to interact appropriately with important guests, and desperate enough to accept the demanding schedule without complaint. Rosalinda's staff quarters, located in a separate wing with the other domestic workers, appear modest but comfortable by Dubai standards. A private bedroom with attached bathroom, while most house staff share accommodations. What makes her room unique is what police discovered after her disappearance. A false bottom in her wardrobe concealing luxury items inconsistent with her salary. Hermes scarf, still in its box. A Louis Vuitton wallet. An expensive smartphone separate from the basic model she used for work communications. More tellingly, investigators found a small notebook hidden inside the spine of a Filipino-English dictionary. Inside, written in a code mixing numbers and characters from different alphabets, were account details for banks in Singapore and the Cayman Islands, along with what appeared to be a systematic record of conversations and encounters with all 3 Al-Mazrui men. She was methodical, Amina observes, examining photographs of the notebook. This wasn't opportunism. This was strategy. The contrast between Rosalinda's public presentation, deferential, modest, religiously observant, and her private calculations reveals a woman playing a long and dangerous game. Where most domestic workers in the Gulf states focus on maximizing remittances home while avoiding trouble, Rosalinda clearly had larger ambitions. Her systematic approach to the Al-Mazrui men began with careful observation. Household staff later reported that during her first months, Rosalinda asked subtle questions about each family member's habits, preferences, and tensions. She volunteered for assignments that would expose her to different parts of the house, building a comprehensive understanding of the family's fractured dynamic. With Khalifa, the relationship began through healthcare. After noticing the patriarch struggling with insomnia, Rosalinda prepared a traditional Filipino tea that seemed to help. This small kindness opened a door, allowing her to position herself as a caretaker in a household where employees typically remained invisible. She learned his medications, anticipated his needs, and gradually became the one staff member he would speak to beyond giving orders. She listened to me, Khalifa later admitted during questioning, his composure cracking momentarily. After Fatima died, everyone either feared me or wanted something from me. Rosalinda seemed to actually care. What began as brief conversations expanded into evening discussions in his private study. Khalifa shared business concerns he wouldn't reveal to his sons. He spoke of disappointments and regrets that his public persona never acknowledged. In a life defined by power and control, these moments of vulnerability created a dependency that Rosalinda carefully nurtured. The physical aspect developed gradually, a comforting touch during a moment of melancholy, a massage for tension headaches, eventually intimate contact that Khalifa, in his loneliness, didn't resist. For a man whose religious identity prohibited such relationships outside marriage, these encounters created a dangerous leverage point that Rosalinda documented meticulously. With Nawaf, Rosalinda employed different tactics. Initially assigned to organize household files, she revealed an unexpected understanding of financial matters. When Nawaf discovered her reviewing business documents she was organizing, rather than reporting her, he was impressed by her insightful questions. Soon he was using her as an unofficial sounding board for business strategies he couldn't discuss with subordinates and wouldn't share with his father. "My wife has no interest in understanding what I do," he confided during late evening discussions in his office. "She's content with the lifestyle but finds the work beneath her attention." Rosalinda positioned herself as everything Layla was not: intellectually engaged, supportive of his ambitions, and understanding of the pressure he faced as heir to the Al-Mazrui legacy. The relationship evolved from professional to personal, eventually crossing boundaries that Nawaf, despite his carefully constructed public image, seemed almost relieved to transgress. Bassam presented the most direct opportunity. During one of his frequent parties, he made advances that other staff would have reported or deflected. Rosalinda instead responded with calculated ambiguity, neither encouraging nor discouraging, allowing him to pursue while maintaining deniability. For Bassam, accustomed to women attracted to his wealth rather than himself, her apparent disinterest became irresistible. "She wasn't impressed by any of it," he later told investigators, gesturing to his luxury surroundings. "That made her different." What none of the men realized was that Rosalinda had begun documenting everything. The initial recordings were simple, conversations captured on her phone, apparently for self-protection. But as relationships deepened, her methods grew more sophisticated. Hidden cameras installed in her quarters recorded intimate encounters. Conversations about business deals, family conflicts, and financial matters were carefully saved and categorized. The first sign of her true intentions appeared 8 months before her death: a wire transfer of 50,000 dirhams to a Singapore account under a false name. The money came from Sheikh Ahmed bin Rashid al-Jabri, son of Ibrahim al-Jabri, the Al-Mazrui family's chief business rival. This initial payment, investigation would later reveal, was for preliminary information about the Saudi port deal that could give the al-Jabri family competitive advantage. What began as strategic intelligence gathering evolved into something far more valuable and dangerous. As Rosalinda's relationships with all three Al-Mazrui men deepened, so did her understanding of just how devastating the right information at the right time could be. If you're finding this story of calculation and vulnerability compelling, consider subscribing to follow Detective Amina's investigation. How does a woman navigate the treacherous waters of power and exploitation? What drives someone to risk everything for wealth? And how does justice function when victim and perpetrators exist in moral shadows? March 2023. A private dining room at Zuma, one of Dubai's most exclusive restaurants. Rosalinda Mendoza sits alone at a corner table, dressed in a simple black dress that appears modest but costs 3 months of her official salary. Her hair, normally pulled back in a practical bun while working, falls in soft waves around her shoulders. She checks her watch, a Cartier tank, a gift from Khalifa on her last birthday, though neither Nawaf nor Bassam know this. 2 years have passed since she first entered the Al-Mazrui villa. 2 years of careful calculation, strategic relationship building, and meticulous documentation. Tonight, she's meeting someone who isn't aware of her connection to the Al-Mazrui family, a crucial step in her endgame. As she waits, Rosalinda mentally reviews the elaborate architecture of deception she's constructed. Managing one clandestine relationship would challenge most people. Maintaining 3 simultaneous affairs with men who live in the same house requires something beyond skill, a kind of psychological compartmentalization that borders on art. Her phone buzzes with a message from Khalifa. Missing you tonight. Business dinner running late. Come to my quarters at 11. She responds immediately, of course. I'll bring your sleeping tea. The message conveys both intimacy and servitude, the careful balance she maintains with the patriarch. 10 minutes later, her second phone vibrates. This one from Nawaf. Need your thoughts on the presentation for tomorrow. Can you review it before I leave for Riyadh? Her reply is different in tone. Already making notes. We'll have feedback by 9 p.m. Safe travels. Professional, competent, but with an undercurrent of personal concern. The third message arrives as her guest appears at the restaurant entrance. Bassam, party tonight. Wear the red thing. No question, just expectation. To this, she doesn't immediately respond. Let him wait, wonder. The psychological game with Bassam requires occasional strategic distance. The man approaching her table is Tariq Al-Jabri's chief of operations, though his business card identifies him as a private investment consultant. What follows is a conversation conducted entirely in the language of hypotheticals and abstractions. The opportunity we discussed has developed favorable parameters. He begins after ordering a mineral water. I've prepared a comprehensive portfolio for review, Rosalinda replies, sliding a small USB drive across the table. The dance has begun. But to understand how Rosalinda reached this moment, poised to sell the Al-Mazrui family's secrets to their greatest business rival, we must look at how she managed her triple life. For 2 years, Rosalinda has maintained separate and distinct relationships with all 3 Al-Mazrui men. With Khalifa, she presents herself as caretaker, confidant, and companion, a relationship that blends emotional support with physical comfort. With Nawaf, she's positioned herself as intellectual partner and admirer of his business acumen, the woman who sees his brilliance when his father and wife do not. With Bassam, she plays the role of forbidden adventure, neither the socialites who pursue his wealth nor the conservative Emirati women his family would approve of. Each relationship exists in its own distinct universe, maintained through careful scheduling and strategic communication. Rosalinda keeps separate phones for each man. She creates alibis through a network of Filipino workers in neighboring villas who cover for her absences. When necessary, she claims family emergencies in the Philippines that require her temporary return home, creating windows for relationship maintenance without suspicion. The psychological discipline required is extraordinary. In a single day, she might prepare Khalifa's morning tea with filial devotion, review business documents with Nawaf with professional detachment, then transform into Bassam's exotic diversion by evening. Each interaction requires not just different behavior but different personality aspects, different knowledge bases, different emotional presentations. Sometimes I forget who I really am, she confessed in a rare, unguarded moment to her cousin working in Abu Dhabi. It's like playing 3 different characters in a television drama. The physical evidence of these relationships accumulates in her careful records. From Khalifa, expensive jewelry stored in a safety deposit box at Emirates NBD Bank, text messages discussing business matters he'd never share publicly, recordings of him describing tax strategies that skirt legal boundaries. From Nawaf, confidential business documents she's helped review, compromising photos taken in his office, recordings of his criticisms of his father's business decisions. From Bassam, designer clothing, access codes to his private residence wing, videos of drug use at his parties that would devastate the family's reputation with conservative business partners. Rosalinda's technical sophistication has grown alongside these relationships. What began with simple phone recordings evolved into hidden cameras disguised as power adapters in her quarters. Basic notes became encrypted files stored on anonymous cloud servers. Her documentation system now includes timestamps, contextual details, and cross-references, creating an interconnected web of evidence impossible to dismiss as isolated indiscretions. This elaborate construct serves a purpose beyond blackmail or leverage. It's aimed at the heart of what matters most to the Al-Mazrui family, their business empire and the multi-billion-dollar deal that will secure its future. The Al-Mazrui family built their fortune initially through shipping, controlling crucial supply routes between Asia and Europe through the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Under Khalifa's leadership, they expanded into real estate development, financing much of Dubai's explosive growth in the early 2000s. Their holdings now span 5 continents, but their power center remains the UAE, where their name adorns buildings, university wings, and hospital departments. The crown jewel in their corporate strategy is the upcoming port development project, a 3 billion dirham investment partnership with Saudi Arabia's bin Talal Investment Group, representing members of the Saudi royal family. The project would create a new deep-water port capable of handling the world's largest container ships, with integrated smart technology positioning it as the most advanced shipping facility in the Middle East. For the Al-Mazrouis, this isn't merely another business venture. It represents generational security and regional dominance. For Khalifa, it's the capstone achievement of his career, final vindication of his business vision. For Nawaf, it's the project that will prove his readiness to eventually lead the family empire. For Bassam, it means continued wealth without responsibility, the lifestyle he depends on secured for decades. The Saudi investors, however, place unusual emphasis on the moral character of their business partners. As members of the royal family, they balance religious conservatism with business pragmatism. Their investment committee has previously withdrawn from deals when partners were linked to scandals involving alcohol, extramarital relationships, or financial impropriety. Their requirements go beyond typical due diligence to include what they term ethical alignment. This moral dimension creates the perfect vulnerability for exploitation and explains why Rosalinda's documentation has such extraordinary value. The Al-Jabri family understands this value perfectly. For 3 generations, they've competed with the Al-Mazrouis for shipping dominance in the Gulf. What began as business rivalry evolved into personal animosity when Ibrahim Al-Jabri blamed Khalifa for manipulating government connections to block a crucial port license 20 years earlier. The financial loss nearly bankrupted the Al-Jabri family, forcing them to sell significant assets to survive. They recovered, diversifying into technology and healthcare, but Ibrahim never forgot the humiliation. Now, with his son Tariq running daily operations, the Al-Jabris see an opportunity for historic revenge. Sabotaging the Saudi deal would cripple their rivals while positioning themselves as the ethical alternative partner. Dubai runs on relationships, not just transactions, Tariq explained to his executive team. If we can damage the Al-Mazroui's reputation with the Saudis, the financial impact goes far beyond this single project. It's about who can be trusted. This context makes Rosalinda's information not just embarrassing but existentially threatening to everything the Al-Mazroui family has built. Rosalinda's path to selling this information began in the tight-knit Filipino worker community, a shadow network that connects thousands of domestic employees across Dubai's wealthy households. Through her cousin working in neighboring Emirates Hills, she learned about the Filipino driver employed by the Al-Jabri family, who mentioned Ibrahim's continuing bitterness toward Khalifa. Her research continued through careful conversations with staff at the Al-Mazroui corporate offices when she delivered documents for Nawaf. She noted the tension whenever the Al-Jabri name arose, catalogued references to the port project's importance, observed the extraordinary measures taken to present a perfect image to the Saudi investors. The approach required careful intermediaries. Rosalinda first contacted the Al-Jabri family through her cousin's boyfriend, who worked maintenance at one of their properties. The message was deliberately vague. A domestic employee with access to sensitive information about the Al-Mazroui family was interested in a confidential business discussion. 3 weeks and 2 intermediaries later, she received instructions for an initial meeting at a coffee shop in Dubai Mall, public enough for safety but anonymous among thousands of shoppers. There she met not with any Al-Jabri family member but with a Filipino-American woman who presented herself as a business consultant, but whose questions revealed intimate knowledge of the port development project. "What exactly do you have that would interest my clients?" the woman asked after 20 minutes of careful conversation. Rosalinda placed a single printed photograph on the table, Khalifa embracing her in his private study, clearly identifiable and clearly inappropriate. "This is the least significant item in my collection," she said quietly. I have material that would ensure the Saudi royal family never does business with the Al-Mazrouis again. The meeting at Zuma 2 weeks later represents the culmination of this careful approach. Across the table, Tariq's chief of operations examines the sample files on the USB drive via a secure tablet. This appears comprehensive, he acknowledges, his expression carefully neutral despite the explosive content he's reviewing. However, verification of the full package would be required before any significant transaction. Of course, Rosalinda replies. I'm prepared to provide authentication methods for the complete archive. The negotiation proceeds with clinical precision. Rosalinda's initial demand, 5 million dirhams, is met with a counter of 1 million. They eventually settle on 2 million upfront, with the remaining 3 million to be paid after the material proves effective in disrupting the Saudi deal. Transfer protocols? He asks. The initial payment to this account. She slides a paper with Singapore bank details across the table. Once confirmed, I'll provide access credentials to the secure server containing all files, organized by subject and verification methods. What the Al Jabri representative doesn't know is that Rosalinda has already prepared her exit strategy. A passport in a different name awaits in a safety deposit box. Tickets to Singapore are booked for the day after the planned information release. A modest but comfortable condominium in Cebu has been purchased through a shell company, with renovation already underway. Her children and mother will join her there after a suitable interval, once she's established her new identity. The final step in her plan takes shape as she returns to the Al-Mazroui villa that evening. 3 separate encounters await her: tea with Khalifa, document review with Nawaf before his early flight, a late appearance at Bassam's party. Each interaction requires perfect performance. Each man must believe himself the center of her attention and loyalty. What Rosalinda doesn't realize as she slips back into the staff entrance is that she's made a critical miscalculation. The files she's provided contain information whose value she hasn't fully assessed. Beyond the moral scandal that would devastate the Saudi deal, certain business conversations she's recorded contain evidence of financial improprieties that could trigger regulatory investigations. Her weapon is more powerful than she knows, and will provoke a more desperate response than she's prepared for. If you're captivated by this web of deception and ambition, subscribe to follow what happens when Rosalinda's carefully gathered evidence explodes into public view. How will 3 powerful men react when they discover their shared betrayal? What happens when a woman believes she can outsmart a family that built an empire through ruthless business tactics? And at what point does the perfect escape plan become the perfect trap? April 17, 2023, 8 a.m. Gulf Standard Time. An anonymous website appears online with a domain name combining the Al-Mazroui family name with an Arabic word for scandal. The site's minimalist design belies its devastating content. A methodically organized archive of videos, audio recordings, text messages, and business documents involving all 3 Al-Mazroui men. The timing is surgical in its precision. The site launches exactly 1 hour before the scheduled final negotiation meeting with the Saudi investors. Simultaneous emails deliver the link directly to the personal addresses of key Saudi representatives, senior financial journalists at Bloomberg and Financial Times, and UAE regulatory officials. Within the first 15 minutes, the site records over 2,000 unique visitors. In the Al-Mazroui corporate headquarters conference room, preparations for the Saudi meeting continue in blissful ignorance. Nawaf reviews presentation materials one final time. Khalifa adjusts his custom-tailored suit, appearance immaculate as always. Bassam, uncharacteristically present for a morning business meeting, checks his phone with visible boredom. None yet realize that their world is collapsing in real time. The website's organization reflects Rosalinda's meticulous nature. Content is categorized by man, by date, and by potential impact. A section labeled Personal Relationships contains explicit videos filmed in her quarters, showing intimate encounters with each Al-Mazroui man. The timestamps, visible in the corner of each recording, reveal the most damning detail. Some encounters occurred within days or even hours of each other. A separate section titled Business Matters presents recordings of conversations never intended for public consumption. Khalifa discussing strategies for understating cargo values on shipping manifests. Nawaf explaining methods for obscuring ownership of certain properties to avoid regulatory scrutiny. Bassam casually mentioning his father's payments to government officials to expedite approvals. The true sophistication of the attack becomes apparent in the timeline section, which juxtaposes the Al-Mazroui's public statements about religious and moral values with private behavior that directly contradicts these claims. Particular emphasis highlights statements made to Saudi investors about shared ethical foundations, alongside time-stamped evidence of conduct those same investors would find reprehensible. The first indication something is wrong comes at 8:27 a.m., when the Saudi delegation's advanced team contacts the Al-Mazroui office to abruptly postpone the morning meeting. The stated reason, urgent matters requiring immediate attention from His Excellency, raises no initial alarm. Such last-minute changes aren't uncommon in high-level Gulf business negotiations, often reflecting behind-the-scenes royal family consultations. At 8:43 a.m., Nawaf's executive assistant receives a call from a Financial Times reporter seeking comment on allegations of business irregularities and personal misconduct. Still unaware of the website, she deflects with practiced skill. The moment of discovery varies for each Al-Mazroui man. For Bassam, it comes first, a text from a nightclub acquaintance at 8:51 a.m. containing only the website link and wide-eyed emoji. His initial amusement at what he assumes is celebrity gossip transforms into horror as he recognizes himself on the screen. For Nawaf, revelation arrives at 9:06 a.m. through a call from the company's chief legal officer, who received an urgent contact from their regulatory compliance team. The lawyer's carefully professional tone barely contains his panic, as he describes extremely sensitive material online requiring immediate attention. Khalifa, insulated by his position and age from constant digital connection, remains unaware the longest. At 9:22 a.m., as he wonders aloud about the Saudis' delay, he notices both sons staring at their phones with expressions he's never seen before. A combination of shock, rage, and something approaching fear. "What's happened?" he demands. Neither son can find words adequate to explain. Nawaf simply turns his tablet toward his father, the website displayed on the screen. The Saudi investor's response is swift and unequivocal. At 10:15 a.m., their delegation issues a formal statement. After careful consideration of recently revealed information, the Bin Talal Investment Group has determined that the proposed port development partnership does not align with our values and standards. We have withdrawn from all negotiations effective immediately. The financial impact cascades through markets with devastating speed. Al-Mazroui Holding Company, the family's publicly traded entity on the Dubai financial market, triggers circuit breakers after falling 17% within the first hour of the news breaking. Trading halts temporarily, but resumes to further losses. By market close, nearly 40% of the company's value has evaporated, over 4 billion dirhams of market capitalization erased in a single day. At 11:30 a.m., the Securities and Commodities Authority of the UAE announces a formal investigation into potential regulatory violations and market disclosure issues based on information contained in the leaked materials. 3 hours later, the Dubai Financial Services Authority opens a parallel inquiry focused specifically on the shipping operations customs declarations. Business partners begin the delicate dance of distance. A major European shipping line announces it's reviewing its strategic partnerships in the Gulf region. 2 international hotel chains with properties managed by Al-Mazroui subsidiaries issue carefully worded statements about upholding brand standards and values. A prominent Qatari investment fund pauses due diligence on a pending joint venture. By afternoon, the scandal has migrated from business circles to Dubai's broader elite social community. Though public social media remains notably silent, UAE cybercrime laws make sharing such content a serious offense. Private messaging platforms overflow with links and astonished commentary. Invitations to upcoming social events are quietly rescinded. Standing dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants are canceled. The machinery of social ostracism operates with ruthless efficiency. Meanwhile, the Al-Jabri family executes the next phase of their strategy with precision. At 3 p.m., they release a statement expressing concern about the serious allegations affecting our industry, while highlighting their own commitment to ethical business practices and transparency. Without directly mentioning the Al-Mazrouis or the Saudi project, they position themselves as the obvious alternative partner. Within the Al-Mazroui villa, each man processes the betrayal in isolation before confronting its collective implications. Khalifa, upon fully comprehending the extent of Rosalinda's documentation, suffers what medical staff later describe as a cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but concerning enough to require immediate attention. A private doctor arrives discreetly, administering medication and recommending hospitalization that Khalifa stubbornly refuses. "I will not be seen entering a hospital today," he tells the physician. "It would signal weakness when we need to project strength." Nawaf receives a call from his wife at their Paris apartment that chills him more than the business implications. Layla's voice, normally controlled and distant, trembles with cold fury. "I have always accepted the practical nature of our marriage," she says. "I've maintained appearances, raised your children, supported your ambitions. In return, I expected basic respect. Not love, perhaps, but dignity. Her terms are non-negotiable. Immediate divorce proceedings with substantial settlement, primary custody of their children, and the Paris and London properties transferred to her name. The alternative is her own public statement that would further damage the family's reputation. You have until tomorrow to have your lawyers contact mine," she concludes, ending the call before he can respond. Bassam faces a different but equally painful form of humiliation. His phone fills with messages from his social circle. Some mocking, others performatively sympathetic, all devastating to someone whose identity revolves around social status. The exclusive clubs where he holds VIP memberships tactfully suggest taking a break from attendance. Friends with upcoming weddings and celebrations send apologetic messages about keeping events intimate. His carefully cultivated image as the charming, carefree playboy dissolves in a deluge of screenshots and forwarded links. The family finally gathers at 7 p.m. in Khalifa's private study, neutral territory that suddenly feels contaminated by the knowledge that Rosalinda had been there, recording and observing. Security staff have swept the room for devices, but the precaution feels inadequate. The damage is already done. "She was with all of us," Bassam states flatly, breaking the silence. "The same woman, while we were in this house. Together." The revelation lands like a physical blow. Each man had believed his relationship with Rosalinda was exclusive, a private arrangement unknown to the others. The discovery of their shared betrayal adds humiliation to injury. "How did none of us know?" Nawaf asks, professional composure cracking. "How did we not see this?" Khalifa, face ashen from his earlier cardiac episode, stares at his sons with an expression mixing anger and something approaching shame. "Because we don't talk to each other," he finally says. "We live in the same house but exist in separate worlds. She exploited the distance between us." The conversation turns to immediate damage control. The family's crisis management team has already retained one of London's top reputation management firms. Their legal department works with specialists in cybersecurity to attempt removal of the website, though mirrors and downloads have already proliferated beyond control. Financial advisors are modeling worst-case scenarios for the business implications. But beneath these practical considerations runs a current of rage, not just at Rosalinda's betrayal, but at their own blindness, at each other, at the sudden vulnerability of men accustomed to power. "Where is she now?" Khalifa demands, turning to the head of household security. "Unknown, sir. She didn't report for duty this morning. Her quarters appear vacant of personal items. We're checking airport manifests and border crossings. Find her." Khalifa orders, his voice dangerously quiet. "Whatever resources required. Find her immediately." The security chief nods, understanding the implicit directive behind the explicit order. In his 20 years serving the family, he's never heard that particular tone in Khalifa's voice. A cold fury that promises consequences beyond legal remedies. What none of them yet knows is that Rosalinda remains in Dubai, finalizing preparations for her departure. Her flight to Singapore leaves in 18 hours. The initial payment from the Al-Jabri family, 2 million dirhams, has been confirmed in her offshore account. The remaining $3 million will transfer once the Saudi deal officially collapses, which appears inevitable. Her plan has unfolded perfectly, except for one critical miscalculation. In her focus on the Al-Mazrui family's moral transgressions, she underestimated the significance of the business conversations she included in her digital archive. The regulatory investigations triggered by those recordings carry criminal implications that transform her betrayal from embarrassing scandal to existential threat. Men who might forgive a personal humiliation will stop at nothing to avoid prison. As the Al-Mazrui family plots its response, Rosalinda makes a final visit to her bank's private vault to retrieve her alternate passport and remaining documents. She feels a momentary regret about the children she's tutored, the staff who've been kind to her, even moments of genuine connection with the men she's betrayed. But these feelings dissolve when she confirms the balance in her Singapore account. Financial freedom purchased at the cost of 3 years' calculated deception. What she doesn't notice is the unmarked vehicle that follows her taxi from the bank, or the frequency with which her photograph is being discreetly shared among security personnel at hotels, shopping malls, and transportation hubs throughout Dubai. The net is closing, though she believes herself already beyond its reach. If this story of ambition and vengeance intrigues you, consider subscribing to witness the final confrontation between Rosalinda and the powerful family she's betrayed. What happens when a woman who's spent years manipulating men accustomed to absolute control suddenly becomes their target? How far will the Al-Mazrui family go to contain a scandal that threatens not just their reputation but their freedom? And how does justice function when everyone involved exists in moral shadow? April 18, 2023, 7:30 p.m. Rosalinda Mendoza's Singapore Airlines flight departs in 11 hours. Her apartment in Cebu awaits final touches from the contractor she's never met in person, but has paid handsomely through anonymous transfers. Her children's private school enrollment forms have been submitted under their new surname. The infrastructure of her future life stands ready. She need only step into it. In her small hotel room near Dubai International Airport, Rosalinda meticulously reviews her exit plan. Her luggage contains nothing connecting her to the Al-Mazrui family. No gifts, no photographs, nothing that might trigger questions at immigration. Her new passport, procured through connections that cost a significant portion of her earlier savings, shows a different birth date and middle name. Subtle changes designed to avoid flagging automated systems while remaining credible if scrutinized by human officers. The second payment from the Al-Jabri family should arrive within days. The Saudi investors have publicly withdrawn. Regulatory investigations have been announced, and the Al-Mazrui family's reputation lies in ruins. She has fulfilled her end of the agreement completely. Yet something troubles her as she mentally catalogs her remaining possessions. In the chaos of the previous day, coordinating the website launch, monitoring initial reactions, executing her disappearance from the villa, she left behind items of both financial and personal significance. A diamond tennis bracelet from Khalifa, small enough to be portable but valuable enough to matter. A rare vintage watch given by Nawaf after a particularly profitable business quarter. Most importantly, a thumb drive containing insurance files not included in the public release, her final leverage if pursued. These items remain hidden in her former quarters at the villa, concealed within a hollowed section of her bed frame that had evaded the family's initial search. The rational decision would be to abandon them. The financial loss is minimal compared to her new wealth, and returning to the villa carries incalculable risk. Yet 3 years of calculated risk have left Rosalinda with supreme confidence in her ability to navigate danger. One final retrieval, she murmurs to herself. Then it's truly finished. Her plan seems sound. At 8:45 p.m., most household staff will be occupied with dinner service or evening duties. Security will focus on external threats rather than a returning former employee. The family itself should be engaged in crisis management elsewhere. Their business empire collapsing requires attention beyond the villa. She can enter through the service area using her still functional access card, retrieve the items from her former quarters, and disappear again within 20 minutes. What Rosalinda cannot anticipate is that Nawaf Al-Mazrui has broken from the family's coordinated response. While Khalifa meets with lawyers at corporate headquarters and Bassam drowns his humiliation at a private club, Nawaf has returned to the villa alone. His purpose is partly practical, securing sensitive documents from his home office, and partly psychological. In the space of 24 hours, his professional reputation, marriage, and sense of self have disintegrated. He seeks the familiar environment of his private domain to regain equilibrium. At 9:12 p.m., Rosalinda enters the villa grounds through the service entrance. The security guard, a Filipino man who's shared occasional cigarette breaks with her, hesitates momentarily, aware of her abrupt departure and the day's turmoil. "I forgot personal documents," she explains with practiced casualness. "Just need 5 minutes to collect them." Her former colleague nods, recording her entry in the logbook but making no calls to verify her authorization. This small courtesy, one worker to another, becomes the first link in a chain of fatal events. Rosalinda moves efficiently through service corridors she knows by heart, avoiding the main areas where remaining staff might spot her. The family's crisis has disrupted normal household routines, leaving sections of the villa eerily deserted. She reaches her former quarters without encountering anyone, the room already partially cleared by staff following her disappearance. As she kneels to access the hidden compartment in her bed frame, retrieving the concealed items, a sound at the door freezes her in place. Nawaf Al-Mazrui stands in the doorway, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Tie loosened, hair slightly disheveled, eyes reddened from stress or perhaps alcohol. "I thought it might be you," he says, his voice unnaturally calm. Security reported an entry through the service gate. "I wanted to see for myself." Rosalinda rises slowly, the diamond bracelet still in her hand. Her mind races through potential responses, calculating which persona might best navigate this unexpected confrontation. The deferential employee, the apologetic lover, the cold blackmailer. She opts for practical neutrality. "I'm leaving Dubai tonight," she states simply. "I came for personal items." "Personal items?" Nawaf's calm cracks slightly. "Like the recordings you made of us? The private conversations you sold to our enemies? Those were already distributed. I have nothing more to share." Nawaf steps into the room, closing the door behind him. The confined space, designed for a servant, not for confrontation, suddenly feels dangerously small. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asks, voice dropping. "Not just the embarrassment, not just the Saudi deal. The regulatory investigations could lead to criminal charges. My father could go to prison." Something in his tone, the genuine fear beneath the anger, triggers Rosalinda's worst instinct, pride. After years of calculated subservience, the opportunity to acknowledge her power proves irresistible. "Your family built an empire by breaking rules," she responds. "Did you think there would never be consequences? From you, our maid." The class distinction emerges reflexively, revealing the hierarchical worldview beneath Nawaf's cosmopolitan veneer. "Your maid, your father's companion, your brother's exotic adventure." Rosalinda allows herself a small, satisfied smile. "I was whatever each of you needed, while being what none of you suspected." This explicit acknowledgement of her manipulation, the confirmation that their experiences were not just recorded but fundamentally false, triggers something primal in Nawaf. His careful self-control, maintained through decades of business negotiations and family politics, begins to fracture. "You planned this from the beginning," he says, advancing slowly. "Everything, every conversation, every touch, it was all strategy." "Not everything," Rosalinda admits, a rare moment of honesty. "But enough." What happens next occurs with a speed that surveillance cameras later capture but cannot fully convey. Nawaf lunges forward, perhaps intending only to grab the bracelet or prevent her departure. Rosalinda steps back, defensive instincts flaring. A struggle ensues, chaotic, desperate, escalating moment by moment. When Nawaf's hands close around her throat, the action seems almost unconscious. Rage finding physical expression before conscious thought can intervene. Rosalinda fights with unexpected strength, her nails drawing blood from his face and hands. She knocks over a lamp, sending shattering glass across the floor. She manages a single, hoarse cry before pressure on her carotid arteries cuts off blood flow to her brain. The clinical reality of strangulation belies its dramatic portrayal in fiction. Consciousness fades within seconds when carotid pressure is applied correctly. Death follows minutes later if the pressure continues. The human body fights instinctively for air and blood flow, creating the violent struggle captured in partial, shadowed glimpses by the corridor security camera. When it ends, Nawaf stands in shocked stillness, looking down at Rosalinda's motionless form. The transformation from controlled corporate executive to killer has taken less than 3 minutes. Blood from scratches on his face drips onto his custom shirt. The diamond bracelet lies forgotten beside Rosalinda's outstretched hand. The reality of what he's done crashes through his shock with physical force, nearly buckling his knees. Nawaf Al-Mazrui, Harvard Business School graduate, heir to billions, respected figure in international finance, has committed murder with his bare hands. His first instinct, almost absurdly practical given the circumstances, is to check for a pulse. Finding none, he staggers back, mind racing through implications and options. Training in crisis management offers no protocol for this situation. His carefully constructed life has reduced to a single, irrevocable action. After several minutes of near paralysis, Nawaf reaches for his phone with trembling hands. He doesn't call emergency services or police. He calls the one person whose authority has shaped his entire existence. "Father," he says when Khalifa answers, his voice barely recognizable. "You need to come home. Now. Alone." Khalifa Al-Mazrui arrives 23 minutes later, using his private entrance and elevator to avoid staff observation. He finds Nawaf sitting on the floor outside Rosalinda's quarters, staring blankly at his bloodied hands. No words are exchanged as Khalifa surveys the scene inside. His face, already aged by the day's earlier crises, seems to collapse further as he absorbs this new catastrophe. Yet when he speaks, his voice carries the same authoritative calm that has guided the family through previous challenges. "Get up," he tells his son. "Go to your quarters. Clean yourself. Speak to no one." Decades of unquestioning obedience override Nawaf's shock. He rises mechanically and moves toward the elevator, leaving his father to manage the situation, as Khalifa has managed every family crisis since before Nawaf's birth. Alone with the evidence of his son's crime, Khalifa makes a single call to Tariq al-Mansouri, the family's security chief for 15 years. His instructions are characteristically direct but deliberately ambiguous. There's a situation in the former maid's quarters, a problem that requires immediate handling. Complete discretion is essential. This carefully worded directive, never explicitly mentioning death or disposal, will later become a critical point in the investigation and subsequent legal proceedings. Did Khalifa directly order a cover-up of murder, or did al-Mansouri interpret a purposefully vague instruction according to his own understanding of loyalty? What's certain is the response. Within 40 minutes, a 3-person security team has removed all evidence from Rosalinda's quarters. Her body, wrapped in an ordinary carpet, is transported via service elevator to a waiting SUV with diplomatic plates that exempt it from routine searches. Security camera footage for the relevant time period is marked for deletion. A staged scene suggesting hasty packing and potential theft is created in her room. The removal operation concludes just as Bassam returns to the villa, intoxicated and emotional from hours of attempting to drown his humiliation. Khalifa makes the calculated decision to include his younger son in the conspiracy, partly because Bassam's alibi for the evening requires verification, and partly because shared complicity ensures shared silence. Nawaf lost control, he explains bluntly as Bassam struggles to comprehend the situation. What's done cannot be undone. Now we protect the family. The body is transported to an Al-Mazrui construction site in Al-Quaz industrial area, where foundation concrete is scheduled to be poured the following morning. The security team, operating with practiced efficiency that suggests this may not be their first such task, places Rosalinda's remains in a remote section of the vast foundation trench. By dawn, she will be entombed in the structural support of another Al-Mazrui commercial property, a grimly literal burial within the empire she sought to exploit. The first official indication of Rosalinda's disappearance comes when she fails to board her Singapore Airlines flight the following evening. Her cousin in Abu Dhabi, concerned after repeated unanswered messages, contacts the Philippines embassy. The embassy, following standard protocol for potentially missing overseas workers, submits an inquiry to Dubai police. The case initially receives routine handling, one of dozens of missing person reports involving foreign workers processed monthly. Only when the embassy liaison notes Rosalinda's employment with the Al-Mazrui family does the matter gain elevated attention. Given the family's prominence and the recent public scandal, police leadership assigns Detective Amina Khalil to conduct preliminary inquiries. At 34, Amina represents a new generation of Emirati law enforcement professionals. University-educated, internationally trained, and less deferential to traditional power structures than her predecessors. Her reputation for thoroughness has advanced her career despite the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated profession. The Rosalinda Mendoza case represents both opportunity and potential liability, depending on what her investigation reveals. Her initial interview at the Al-Mazrui villa occurs on April 21, 3 days after Rosalinda's death. The family presents a unified narrative. Rosalinda disappeared the same day the scandal broke, presumably after orchestrating the information release. Security staff report personal items missing from her quarters, suggesting she packed hastily. The family expresses appropriate concern while implying she likely fled to avoid potential criminal charges for extortion and privacy violations. "We were shocked by her betrayal," Khalifa tells Detective Amina during a carefully staged interview in his study. After years of trust and generous treatment, to discover such calculation was deeply disturbing. Nawaf, present but notably subdued, offers supporting details about missing jewelry and cash, establishing a theft narrative that provides additional motive for Rosalinda's supposed flight. Bassam contributes a performance of wounded innocence, emphasizing his shock at discovering her systematic manipulation of our family. The choreographed perfection of their account triggers Amina's professional skepticism. Families in crisis typically show inconsistencies in their statements, variations in emotional response, disagreements about details. The Al-Mazrui presentation feels rehearsed rather than authentic. As her investigation deepens, Amina begins assembling pieces of a different narrative. The security footage reveals Rosalinda's final entrance to the villa and partial glimpses of the confrontation with Nawaf, directly contradicting the family's claim that she hadn't returned after her initial disappearance. A service gate guard confirms her entry but has no record of her exit. While examining drain samples from the staff quarters, forensics discovers blood evidence later matched to Rosalinda's DNA profile. During staff interviews, a housekeeper mentions cleaning unusual stains from Nawaf's bathroom the morning after her disappearance. When reviewing photographs from a business function 2 days later, Amina notices distinctive scratch marks on Nawaf's face, partially concealed by makeup. Most damning of all, cell tower data shows phones belonging to Nawaf, the security team, and, most tellingly, Rosalinda's device traveling together from the villa to the construction site in the early hours following her disappearance. The phone movement creates a digital map that systematically dismantles the family's carefully constructed fiction. 2 weeks after beginning her investigation, Amina presents her findings to the chief of detectives, a politically connected but fundamentally professional officer known for protecting his investigators when their evidence is sound. The documentation paints a clear picture of murder and conspiracy that points directly at the Al-Mazrui family. "This is a homicide investigation now," she concludes, "and the evidence points directly at the Al-Mazrui family." The chief studies her documentation in silence before responding. "You understand what you're suggesting? This family has connections extending to the highest levels of government." "I'm not suggesting anything," Amina replies. "The evidence speaks for itself." After a measured pause, he nods. "Proceed with the construction site inspection. I'll handle the political aspects. Just ensure your case is absolutely solid before making any moves against the family directly." As Amina leaves his office, she understands the subtext of his authorization. The investigation may proceed, but the standard of evidence required will be extraordinarily high. In cases involving ordinary citizens, the existing evidence might already justify arrests. For the Al-Mazrui family, nothing less than irrefutable proof will suffice. What neither Amina nor her superiors yet realize is that the case is about to escalate beyond Dubai's borders. Rosalinda's cousin has contacted Filipino workers' rights organizations with suspicions about her disappearance. International media, already focused on the Al Mazrui scandal, have begun asking questions about the conveniently missing whistleblower. And in Manila, Rosalinda's mother has begun speaking to journalists about her daughter's increasingly cryptic messages in the weeks before her disappearance. The private family tragedy is transforming into a diplomatic incident that will test the limits of Dubai's justice system and force a reckoning with the power dynamics that enabled both Rosalinda's calculated exploitation and her ultimate murder. April 28, 2023. Al Quaz Industrial Area, Dubai. The morning sun beats down on construction workers pouring foundations for the newest Al Mazrui commercial development, a 12-story office complex already 70% pre-leased to international corporations. Work proceeds normally until 11:17 a.m., when an excavator operator clearing space for utility connections makes a discovery that halts all activity. "I saw something in the soil that didn't belong," he later tells investigators. "At first I thought it was construction waste, maybe carpet or fabric scraps. Then I saw a hand." The site manager immediately secures the area and contacts police. Within 30 minutes, the construction zone transforms into a crime scene. Workers are sequestered for interviews. Police barriers create a perimeter blocking media visibility. When Detective Amina Khalil arrives, she finds senior police officials already present, an unusual response for what would typically be handled by the homicide division without command involvement. The construction company is owned by the Al Mazrui family, her supervisor explains quietly, and we've received tentative identification from personal effects. It appears to be Rosalinda Mendoza. The recovery process continues through the afternoon. Forensic technicians meticulously document the scene, photographing the body's position within recently poured concrete that had only partially set when she was placed there. The medical examiner conducts preliminary examination on site, confirming manual strangulation as the likely cause of death based on hyoid bone fracture and bruising patterns. What strikes Amina most is the disposal method's combination of haste and calculation. The body was placed in an active construction site scheduled for concrete pouring, suggesting opportunity and access rather than long-term planning. Yet the location was also owned by the family, providing controlled access and minimizing outside witnesses. They needed to hide her quickly, but could only use places they controlled completely, she notes in her case file. It limited their options while potentially creating a direct evidence connection. The body yields critical forensic evidence despite attempts to clean the scene. Fibers recovered from Rosalinda's clothing match distinctive Persian carpets, used exclusively in the Al Mazrui villa. Soil samples from her shoes contain plant material from a rare ornamental shrub grown only in Emirates Hills estates, including the Al Mazrui gardens. Most damning is DNA evidence beneath her fingernails that laboratory analysis will later match to Nawaf Al Mazrui's genetic profile. As recovery operations conclude, Amina notices a subtle shift in the political atmosphere surrounding the case. Senior officials who initially authorized her investigation now suggest procedural caution and verification of all evidence chains. Police leadership begins requiring daily briefings on case progress. The department's legal advisor starts attending investigative planning meetings, an unusual step for an active case. There's concern at senior levels about the implications. Her direct supervisor explains, choosing words carefully. This isn't just about one family anymore. It potentially impacts bilateral relations, investment climate, even tourism. The discovery of Rosalinda's body transforms what began as a missing person case into a high-profile homicide investigation with international dimensions. The evidence connecting the crime to the Al Mazrui family grows stronger as forensic analysis continues. Soil from the construction site matches residue found on the family's security team vehicles. Cell tower data confirms movements between the villa and the construction site during the critical time window. Partial fingerprints recovered from Rosalinda's belongings match Al-Mansouri, the security chief. The investigation's expanding scope leads Amina to explore Rosalinda's financial activities, a standard procedure in suspicious death cases, but one that yields unexpected results. Working with financial crime specialists, She traces a complex trail of transactions beginning months before the scandal erupted. Rosalinda maintained accounts in 3 countries under slight variations of her name. Regular transfers, initially small but increasing in frequency and amount, flowed from these accounts to her family in Manila, funding her children's education and her mother's medical care. The source of these funds remained unclear until investigators identified a Singapore account receiving substantial deposits from a shell company connected to Al Jabri Investments. 2 million dirhams transferred 3 days before the website appeared, the financial analyst reports, with another 3 million scheduled to transfer upon confirmation of the Saudi deal's collapse. Digital forensic specialists recovering data from Rosalinda's cloud storage accounts discover meticulously detailed plans spanning over 2 years. Notes categorize each Al Mazrui man's specific vulnerabilities, preferences, and valuable information shared during unguarded moments. Spreadsheets track encounters, gifts, and potential leverage points. A document titled Exit Strategy outlines her entire plan, from information gathering through website creation to her planned disappearance to Singapore and ultimately Cebu. Most revealing are communications with intermediaries connected to the Al Jabri family. These messages confirm the explicit financial arrangement. Rosalinda provided damaging information about the Al Mazrui family in exchange for payment that would transform her economic situation permanently. She wasn't just seeking escape or revenge, Amina observes in her case notes. This was calculated extraction of maximum value after years of systematic documentation. The full extent of Rosalinda's manipulation becomes clear as investigators reconstruct her methodology. Hidden cameras disguised as ordinary household objects. Recording devices concealed in jewelry boxes and picture frames. Specialized software that automatically uploaded encrypted files to secure servers. The technical sophistication suggests either outside assistance or remarkable self-education in surveillance techniques. As these investigative threads converge into a compelling case narrative, the situation escalates beyond Dubai's borders. The Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs issues a formal diplomatic note requesting full transparency and accelerated investigation into the death of a Filipino national. The Filipino ambassador meets with UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs officials, conveying his government's grave concern about the case. International media outlets that initially covered the Al Mazrui scandal as a business story pivot to covering Rosalinda's murder. Headlines shift from Dubai dynasty faces business crisis to Filipino workers' death exposes Gulf labor vulnerability and murder in the mansion. Did Dubai's elite kill to conceal secrets? Migrant worker advocacy organizations mobilize rapidly, organizing vigils outside UAE embassies in Manila, London, and New York. Social media campaigns with hashtags like #JusticeForRosalinda and #OFWLivesMatter gain traction, particularly in countries with large overseas worker populations. The Philippine government, sensitive to domestic political pressure regarding protection of overseas workers, elevates the case to a cabinet-level concern. The UAE government, recognizing the potential damage to international relations and reputation, responds with carefully calibrated public statements emphasizing commitment to thorough investigation regardless of the parties involved, and the equal application of law to all residents and citizens. Behind closed doors, competing interests engage in intense discussion about case handling. For Detective Amina, this heightened attention creates both opportunity and danger. The international spotlight makes it difficult for internal political pressure to simply bury the investigation. However, it also increases the stakes for all involved, potentially forcing senior officials to make example of her if the case threatens larger government interests. Proceed with the evidence, but understand the context. Her chief advises during a private meeting. Justice has many dimensions in a case like this. Not all of them will appear in your investigative reports. The implied message is clear. Build an irrefutable case focused on direct perpetrators rather than extending to broader family conspiracy. Create space for a resolution that delivers accountability while preserving system stability. The Al Mazrui family's response to the investigation evolves as evidence mounts. Initial confidence in their influence gradually transforms into strategic preparation for potential consequences. Their legal team, expanded to include prominent international defense attorneys, begins constructing alternative narratives focused on limiting damage rather than achieving full exoneration. Attempts to derail the investigation operate on multiple levels. Formal complaints question investigation procedures and evidence handling. Business associates with government connections express concerns about regulatory overreach to senior officials. More troublingly, Amina finds her past cases suddenly under administrative review, her financial records subjected to unusual scrutiny, and her family members experiencing unexpected difficulties with government services. They're looking for pressure points, a trusted colleague warns her, either to force you off the case or ensure you understand the consequences of pursuing it too aggressively. Despite this mounting pressure, the evidence becomes impossible to dismiss. Forensic analysis confirms the DNA under Rosalinda's fingernails belongs to Nawaf with statistical certainty beyond any reasonable doubt. Security camera footage, despite deletion attempts, has been partially recovered from system backups, showing critical moments of Rosalinda's final return to the villa. Al-Mansouri's phone contained deleted messages discussing package transport to the construction site at the exact time Rosalinda's body was moved. Most damaging is testimony from a junior security team member who participated in the body transport but was excluded from subsequent financial arrangements that benefited his colleagues. Offered immunity from prosecution, he provides a detailed account of the night's events, including Khalifa's instructions and Nawaf's visible injuries. The investigation reaches its decisive moment when Amina presents completed case files to the chief prosecutor's office. The documentation presents an evidence chain connecting Nawaf directly to the murder, Al-Mansouri to the body disposal, and Khalifa to the cover-up instructions. The prosecutor, reviewing the material in silence, finally looks up with an expression mixing professional appreciation and personal concern. "This is thorough work," he acknowledges. "But you understand the complexity of proceeding against this family? I understand my responsibility to follow evidence regardless of where it leads." Amina responds, "As I believe you understand yours." The implied challenge, professional to professional, hangs in the air between them. After a measured silence, the prosecutor nods slightly. "I'll need 24 hours to consult with senior justice officials. The charges will proceed, but their structure requires careful consideration. The consultation process extends beyond justice officials to include diplomatic advisors, economic ministers, and ultimately the ruling family's representatives. The resulting decision reflects Dubai's delicate balancing of international reputation, domestic stability, and elite interests. 48 hours later, Amina receives notification that arrest warrants have been issued, but with a scope narrower than her evidence supported. Nawaf al-Mazrui faces charges of manslaughter rather than premeditated murder, framing the killing as an unplanned act during a confrontation rather than intentional homicide. Al-Mansouri and 2 security team members are charged with evidence tampering and improper disposal of human remains. Khalifa and Bassam face no charges, despite evidence of their involvement in the cover-up. "This is the achievable justice," her chief tells her privately. "Not perfect, but significant. For the first time, a family of this standing will face actual consequences. That itself represents progress." The compromise satisfies no one completely. Philippine authorities express disappointment at the limited charges while acknowledging the unprecedented nature of any prosecution against such a powerful family. International human rights organizations criticize the selective application of justice. The Al-Mazrui family, despite avoiding the worst potential consequences, faces the previously unthinkable prospect of a family member in the criminal justice system. As arrests are executed with carefully managed media access, Amina reflects on the case's larger implications. Rosalinda Mendoza and the Al-Mazrui family existed at opposite extremes of Dubai's social hierarchy, yet participated in a shared moral compromise. Her calculated exploitation of their vulnerabilities and their abuse of power both reflected the same fundamental dynamic, treating human relationships as transactional rather than inherently valuable. The case file closes with Amina's final observation. "Justice in this matter is necessarily incomplete. The victim's actions don't justify her murder, and the perpetrator's status doesn't excuse their crimes. What this case truly exposes isn't just the actions of individuals, but the system that enabled their collision." a system where power imbalance makes genuine human connection impossible and reduces interactions to calculation, exploitation, and ultimately violence. May 15, 2023. Dubai Criminal Court, Special Chamber. The proceedings against Nawaf Al-Mazrui and 3 members of the family's security team begin without the customary media presence. Access is severely restricted, with only select observers permitted, representatives from the Philippines embassy, judicial officials, and immediate family members. Even in a society accustomed to powerful figures receiving preferential treatment, the exceptional handling of this case speaks to its unprecedented nature. Nawaf enters wearing a traditional white kandura rather than prison attire, a concession to his status that doesn't escape notice from the Filipino observers. 10 days in detention have visibly affected him. His normally confident posture diminished, his expression a careful mask of dignified resignation. He avoids eye contact with everyone except his father, seated in the front row looking a decade older than he did a month earlier. The charges, when formally read, confirm the compromise that Detective Amina had anticipated. Nawaf faces involuntary manslaughter rather than premeditated murder, the legal theory being that he never intended to kill Rosalinda but lost control during a confrontation over her betrayal. Al-Mansuri, the security chief, bears charges of evidence tampering, improper disposal of human remains, and obstruction of justice. 2 junior security team members face lesser charges related solely to body transport and evidence concealment. The prosecution's opening statement carefully navigates political sensitivities while presenting sufficient facts to justify the charges. This case involves a regrettable death resulting from a complex situation. The prosecutor begins, his characterization deliberately minimizing both Rosalinda's calculated exploitation and Nawaf's violent response. The timeline presented omits Khalifa's involvement entirely, creating a narrative where Al-Mansuri acted independently after discovering the situation. Defense strategy follows an equally calibrated approach. Nawaf's attorney, a former judge with connections throughout the judicial system, acknowledges the basic facts while emphasizing mitigating factors. My client had just suffered devastating personal and professional harm through the victim's deliberate actions, he argues. His response, while tragic and regrettable, occurred during a moment of extreme emotional distress that any reasonable person would find overwhelming. For Amina, watching from a back corner of the courtroom, the proceedings represent both achievement and disappointment. The fact that Nawaf sits as a defendant at all constitutes an unprecedented accountability moment for Dubai's elite. Yet the charges reduction and the narrative's careful construction to protect Khalifa and Bassam reflect the enduring power of family connections over pure justice. The trial proceeds with methodical efficiency, each side operating within the unspoken boundaries of the compromise. Forensic evidence establishing Nawaf's direct role in the killing is presented without objection. Security camera footage showing portions of Rosalinda's final entry to the villa and the subsequent removal of her body is entered into evidence. The defense focuses exclusively on Nawaf's mental state rather than disputing factual elements, portraying him as a victim of calculated manipulation who momentarily lost control. After just 4 days of proceedings, remarkably brief for a homicide case, the court reaches its decision. Nawaf receives a 10-year sentence, substantially less than the 25-year standard for similar crimes involving non-elite defendants. Al-Mansuri receives 8 years, while the junior security members receive 3-year sentences. The judge's statement emphasizes Nawaf's previously unblemished record and significant extenuating circumstances as justification for the reduced punishment. Perhaps the most significant element of the sentencing comes as an addendum, the approval of substantial blood money payment to Rosalinda's family in the Philippines. This traditional Islamic legal concept, which allows financial compensation to victims' families in lieu of more severe punishment, provides the framework for transferring 5 million dirhams, approximately $1.36 million to Rosalinda's children and mother. Your client accepts this arrangement? The judge asks the Philippines embassy's legal representative. The family accepts the financial provision for the children's future. Comes the carefully worded response, neither explicitly forgiving nor condemning. The amount exceeds typical blood money payments by a factor of 10, reflecting both the high-profile nature of the case and the government's desire to resolve international tensions. For Rosalinda's family, it represents life-changing wealth that will provide education, housing, and financial security previously unimaginable. For the Al-Mazrui family, it represents an acceptable cost to limit both legal consequences and ongoing publicity. When the proceedings conclude, Amina watches Nawaf being led away by court officers. The restrained dignity in his bearing suggests a man who believes he'll serve a fraction of his nominal sentence in a facility nothing like standard UAE prisons. Khalifa rises slowly, supported by Bassam, his expression unreadable as he exits through a private door shielded from the few waiting journalists outside. Is this justice? The Philippines embassy representative asks Amina afterward. It's the justice that was possible, she responds, the distinction significant. Beyond the courtroom, the scandal's business repercussions continue to reshape Dubai's commercial landscape. The Al Mazrui empire, built over 3 generations, suffers damage far exceeding the legal consequences. The Saudi port development contract, cornerstone of their expansion strategy, is formally awarded to the Al Jabri family in June, complete with ceremonial signing attended by Saudi royalty. The symbolic transfer of influence couldn't be clearer. Regulatory investigations triggered by Rosalinda's leaked recordings result in unprecedented oversight of remaining Al Mazrui business entities. The Financial Services Authority imposes compliance monitors with extensive powers to review transactions, approve senior hiring decisions, and restrict certain business activities. What was once Dubai's most independent business empire now operates under constraints typically reserved for companies with documented fraud histories. Khalifa, health compromised by the ongoing stress, announces his retirement from active management roles in July, a face-saving formulation for what amounts to forced removal. Though he retains ownership stakes and board positions, day-to-day control transfers to professional managers rather than family members. The statement references focusing on health and family matters, while making no mention of the scandal that precipitated this unprecedented step down. Bassam, perhaps the least equipped for crisis navigation, attempts reinvention through philanthropy. The Bassam Al Mazrui Foundation launches with a 50 million dirham commitment to supporting ethical business education and migrant worker protections. The transparent attempt at reputation rehabilitation meets with skepticism from advocacy groups and outright mockery on social media. Yet it represents the family's first acknowledgement, however indirect, of systemic issues underlying Rosalinda's death. The villa itself, scene of both exploitation and murder, stands empty, its furnishings removed, its staff reassigned. Real estate agents discreetly explore potential sale to foreign buyers unfamiliar with its history. Local knowledge ensures no Emirati family will purchase the property regardless of discount offered. The scandal's taint considered spiritually and socially contaminating. For Dubai's business community, the Al Mazrui downfall prompts subtle but significant changes in operating practices. Legal departments strengthen employee confidentiality agreements with specific provisions against recording or documenting private activities. Hiring protocols for domestic staff increase scrutiny of backgrounds and digital footprints. Most notably, family businesses accelerate professionalization of management, reducing reliance on relatives who might create personal scandals with business repercussions. The case's most tangible policy outcome emerges in September, when the UAE Ministry of Human Resources announces enhanced protections for domestic workers. The reforms include mandatory rest periods, improved complaint mechanisms, and specific prohibition against assigning duties outside employment contracts. While modest compared to international standards, these changes represent the government's acknowledgement that the Rosalinda case exposed genuine vulnerabilities requiring systemic response. For Detective Amina, professional consequences materialize with bureaucratic subtlety. Her performance evaluation, previously filled with commendations, now includes concerns about procedural thoroughness, potentially impacting efficiency. Her case assignments shift away from high-profile investigations toward document-intensive financial crimes. A promised promotion to senior investigator remains perpetually under review, neither denied nor approved. They won't fire you. That would be too obvious, her mentor explains during a private lunch. But your ceiling has been defined. You've demonstrated independence that makes certain people uncomfortable. Amina accepts these limitations with the same pragmatic clarity that guided her investigation. I knew the potential costs when I pushed forward, she tells colleagues who express outrage at her treatment. Some cases are worth the career impact. In Manila, Rosalinda's family navigates the complex emotional and financial aftermath. Her mother, initially reluctant to accept blood money from her daughter's killers, ultimately recognizes the opportunity it represents for her grandchildren. The funds establish educational trusts, secure permanent housing, and provide healthcare coverage previously unattainable. Rosalinda's children, now teenagers attending private schools, face the complicated legacy of a mother whose actions were both calculating and ultimately sacrificial. She did terrible things for reasons that made sense to her, Rosalinda's mother tells a Filipino journalist in the single interview she grants. I cannot judge her choices. I can only ensure her children have the opportunities she was willing to die for. The international dimensions of the case gradually recede as media attention shifts to newer scandals. Periodic articles appear on anniversary dates, typically framed around lessons learned or continuing challenges in Gulf labor practices. Migrant worker advocacy organizations reference the case in policy discussions and awareness campaigns, though rarely with nuanced understanding of Rosalinda's active role in the events leading to her death. 1 year after the trial, Amina receives an unexpected invitation to meet with the new Philippines ambassador to the UAE, a career diplomat who arrived after the case concluded. Over coffee in a discreet hotel restaurant, he expresses his government's appreciation for her professionalism during the investigation. We understand the constraints you operated under, he says. That you achieved any accountability at all is remarkable in context. The case was never simple, Amina responds. Rosalinda wasn't just a victim of exploitation. She was actively exploiting vulnerabilities she identified. The Al-Mazrui men weren't just privileged abusers of power. They were also manipulated by someone they trusted. Which makes your pursuit of evidence-based justice all the more impressive, the ambassador notes. It would have been easier to accept the simplified narratives either side preferred. This conversation prompts Amina's final reflection on the case in her private journal, words that will later appear anonymized in a scholarly article on justice systems in Gulf states. The Rosalinda Mendoza case revealed intertwined exploitations rather than simple victimization. An economically vulnerable woman weaponized intimacy against powerful men who themselves viewed her as disposable. Both sides reduced human relationship to transaction, she converting trust to financial leverage, they purchasing companionship without recognizing her agency. The system enabling their collision remains largely intact despite this tragedy. Wealth still insulates from full consequence. Vulnerability still forces impossible choices. Justice was partial because our conception of justice itself struggles with cases where no party arrives with clean hands. There were no innocent parties in that villa, only different degrees of guilt. But only one person paid with their life. 2 years after Rosalinda's death, Dubai continues its relentless growth. New skyscrapers rise. New luxury developments emerge from the desert. New services cater to the wealthy. The workers who build and maintain this gleaming city, the construction laborers, housekeepers, drivers, and service staff, continue arriving from the Philippines, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and dozens of other nations. They send money home, build lives in the margins of luxury, and navigate the power imbalances embedded in the global economy. The Al-Mazrui name gradually fades from daily business discussion, their diminished influence accepted as the natural consequence of scandal rather than a meaningful shift in systemic power. Nawaf serves his sentence in a special facility reserved for prominent individuals, with amenities and privileges ordinary inmates could never access. Khalifa focuses on rebuilding family investments through intermediaries, his direct involvement limited but his influence still substantial in certain circles. Bassam's foundation continues its carefully calibrated public relations activities, generating occasional positive press without addressing root inequalities. At the construction site where Rosalinda was found, a new building now stands completed, a gleaming tower of glass and steel housing multinational corporations and luxury retail. Nothing marks the location where her body was discovered. No memorial acknowledges what happened there. The physical evidence of tragedy has been built over, incorporated into the foundation of Dubai's continuing expansion, visible only to those who know precisely where to look.